This video will guide you through how VisionWorks, our next-generation life planning software, can take your financial planning business to the highest level.
So thank you for your time today. We're going to be discussing completeness as an important foundation for clients' belief in output. If something that clients feel is important isn't entered correctly or is missing, they'll project that inaccuracy onto the rest of the plan. And without belief, clients will be reluctant to act. I find a very good example of this is an RDSP for a child. So you can see that VisionWorks can model them. Although this applies only to a small percent of the population, if your clients have a child with a disability, their child's well-being is possibly their greatest concern should something happen to them. If they've established an RDSP for their child and you can't model it, they'll wonder what else is missing. Your clients will project the RDSP incompleteness on the rest of the plan, which will undermine their belief in output. The ability to model an RDSP for a child is a fairly obvious example of the importance of completeness. But just how detailed do you need to be? I want to return to the ideal planning candidate software, and we'll open up Bill's scores. And you can see that, he has a very high score for accountability, medium for participation, high for learning. So I want to remind you about this because I think it will also help you understand how complete you need to be for a client. With Bill's scores being high, I would suggest that being fairly detailed or complete is something that he'll expect. Now, on the other hand, I've intentionally made Sue's scores quite low. And in this case, I think it would be fairly obvious that doing something overly detailed for somebody that has low scores would just be a waste of your time. They're not really going to engage in planning all that much. And so keeping it fairly high level is probably all you need to do. Now, I want to also tie this back into the types of plans that we can offer. So I'm going to bring up the retirement planning questionnaire, and I just want to run through that a little bit and kind of relate this back to how complete do we need to be. If we go down to the savings contributions section, you'll see that for each of Bill and Sue, there's only one place that you can enter, say, a TFSA value or an RRSP value, even though the clients might have, a number of RRSPs or TFSAs. But I would suggest if somebody's got a low ideal planning candidate score, that aggregating things and putting the value of all RRSPs into a single RRSP is probably sufficient for them. But on the other hand, if you're dealing with somebody who has a high score, I would suggest to you that itemizing each RRSP would be fairly important for their belief in output. So I want to remind you that at the very beginning, you have the ability to go in and edit that text box, and that text box can have instructions, disclaimer text, whatever you want. So one of the things you might consider is putting in some comment about how much detail you want. And again, if we go back down and have a look at the end, you can see that there's a notes window. So even though there's only a place for one TFSA or one RSP, at the beginning with your instructions, you could say, for example, if you want to aggregate your RRSPs into a single value, that's fine. But on the other hand, if you want to itemize one, you could use the notes section to list the value, list the value of other RRSPs. So just, again, tailoring this a little bit to the kind of client that you're going to be working with. I want to go to the import-export page for VisionWorks. And one of the things that I'll just do is remind you that if there are entries, and I think I'll use TFSAs for Bill, let's say he has multiple TFSAs, that if there are entries that have not yet been completed, that when you go to the import-export page, and you'll notice that print questions is pre-selected by default, if you click print preview, what happens is VisionWorks will build a customized questionnaire that just has on it anything that's being entered that has not yet had any data assigned to it. So again, keep in mind that you have this ability to generate customized questionnaires for those clients who would want to see more detail in their plan. We're going to be talking about customized questionnaires in more detail next week, but the important point to understand is that we've moved questionnaires to the middle of the planning process, and because of that, we're able to create customized questionnaires for each client, and we'll go into this in more detail next week. I have a very strong belief that putting questionnaires at the beginning of the planning process is a real impediment to a successful plan, simply because nobody likes to complete questionnaires. So if we can move them to the middle of the process, customize them for each client, and reduce their lengths, I think you'll find that clients will embrace planning more, just because they don't have to struggle through questionnaires, which nobody ever likes to complete. I also want to just go to Bill's tab and remind you that a great many of the other types of assets, because we're talking about completeness, making sure we're getting everything entered. So a great many of the other types of assets are under the other category, other assets button. So you can see things like stock options, employee share purchase plans, and so on. I'm going to include the employee share purchase plan because I want to make a very important point. This whole issue of completeness raises a question, which is, maybe we're going to go through some sort of asset that we create, not really fully knowing how to model it. But I want you just to remember that help is available and it's context sensitive. And if you click the help button, recall that you'll get a general overview help window. But if you click the See Also button, what you'll get are the step-by-step instructions as to how to complete the different fields in a particular entry panel. So the reason I just wanted to review that is because I think if you get used to using help, that you'll find that the different types of assets that might show up that a client has and that you might not be too familiar with might be employee share purchase plans, might be SARs, DSUs, RSUs, and so on, that if you're using the help feature, it should save you a lot of time and a lot of frustration. And very often we get asked questions that if somebody just used help, that they probably could get the answers on their own. So again, we're happy to entertain your questions, but if you remember to use help, I think you'll find that working with the software is actually a lot easier on you. You're not wasting time trying to figure out how things work. It's usually just available in help. So that was just a comment on completeness from the point of view of different assets that clients might have. But as far as things like home and lifestyle entries are concerned, my suggestion always, and we discussed this last week, is that you enter home expenses, vehicle expenses, in vacation expenses. And the reason for that, for instance, is a two-vehicle family is very likely at some point in life to become a one-vehicle family. And then similarly, as we always discuss, people may want to spend more on vacations when they first retire, but it's really unlikely, just because of age and health, that they'll be continuing to spend the money on those vacations, late in life. So by making those adjustments, cutting down from two vehicles to one, ending vacations at some age, 80, 85, 75, whatever it might be, that we're going to reduce the drawdown on the retirement assets, when in fact in real life it's very unlikely that those draws will be taking place. So one of the other things that I want to do is go to homes for a minute, and I want you to notice that I have a home right now. They live in Ontario, but what this couple wants to do is move to BC when they retire, the summer of 2026 in this particular file. Now, I also want you to notice that if we go to property taxes, what's available for BC residents is a property tax deferral. But notice that checkbox is disabled, so we can't actually model the property tax deferral. So one of the things that you need to keep in mind is that in order to enable certain features, what we have to do on the will tab is we have to indicate where the province of residence is for some of those assets. So because by default, it's just Ontario, they live in Ontario now, then anything that applies to BC is not available. So if we change this to BC, what's going to happen is that we're going to enable that property tax deferral checkbox for the BC home. You can see now it's available, so we could go in and model property tax deferral. But also that's going to have a bearing on their probate fees, probate fees being based on the province of residence of the asset. So just keep in mind when you're modeling things like homes, that going to the will tab and indicating the province of residence of that home, which they could have in the future, is going to enable other features that are province specific. And finally, and you all know this, is that if clients own private companies and have personal trusts, I really urge you to use CorpWorks and TrustWorks in order to model them correctly. Add-ons or workarounds with spreadsheets are very inaccurate and actually take a lot of time. And the other thing that I think is very important is clients who own corporations and have trusts are likely your wealthiest clients. They deserve planning excellence. And besides that, they probably have accountants and lawyers. And in their minds, anything less than complete accuracy will undermine their perception of your professionalism. And that could, their opinion about that could find its way back to your client. So again, I want to remind you about what we call the relationship equation, which we talked about a few weeks ago. Strong relationship is built on the client's feeling that you understand them, that you're dependable, and then one of the other very important factors is their perception of your expertise. So if we're doing anything that is less than accurate, again, it undermines their perception of your expertise, and that lowers the relationship equation. You may recall that the key variable, of course, is self-orientation. If the client feels that you're doing plans primarily for your benefit as a salesperson, then they'll perceive your self-orientation as high, and that's going to lead to a low score. Whereas if they feel you are genuinely trying to help them, and your self-orientation is low, then that will lead to a high relationship score. And this is available, this PDF file is available on the website, but you can see the math here. If you score 8, 8, and 8 on understanding, dependability, and expertise, but clients perceive that you're only doing this as a sales aid, doing plans as a sales aid, your self-orientation is high. So 24 divided by 8, the relationship score is 3. On the other hand, if we have the same numerator, 24, but the client perceives that you're genuinely trying to help them, create a workable plan so they can achieve the life they want, your self-orientation score is low, a 2, then the relationship score is high. So the key variable, of course, is the client's perception of your self-orientation. But again, I just wanted to review the relationship equation because one of the critical factors is the client's perception of your expertise. So doing anything, and I'm not, of course, speaking about clients with low ideal planning candidate scores, but doing anything for clients who are going to be good planning clients that diminishes their perception of your expertise is going to undermine the relationship you want to build with them. I want to finish by introducing you to the action equation, which we're going to be looking at in January. But very briefly, for somebody to act on a plan, there are 5 key ingredients. Intention, I intend to do what I need to do in order to have the life I want. I've learned what I need to do. And again, we talk about working interactively with clients. We'll be getting that into the second half of the series when we start talking about output. But learning experientially by creating plans with clients has a significantly positive effect on the learning score. But then also belief. And what we talked about last week and this week is that the foundation for belief and output is really using a dynamic model and a model that's complete so that the software is capable of molding to the client whatever their perception is of what they want to have and do in life, how that might change over time, and including all the different assets they might have, whether it's an RDSP for a child, an employee share purchase plan at work, whatever it might be. Those 2 things are the critical ingredient in having a high belief score in this action equation. And then, of course, working with clients is important because then they get to reflect their personal preferences, their values, and their attitudes, their preferred way of behaving. So again, the best plans are not necessarily technically the best plans. They're plans that will help clients achieve what they want in life, but with which clients are comfortable so that implementation follows quite naturally. And then, of course, the final ingredient is confidence. We can't be building plans that are outside of clients' control because there's a lack of confidence as a result. If plans are built exclusively on portfolio returns, then clients may not feel very comfortable with the plan simply because portfolio results are outside of their control. But if we have other factors that are being used, such as their work, what would you need to achieve at work? I always use that with financial advisors because you're achieving your wants in life by trying to build a career, a good financial planning business. And other things that are within clients' control can be, how they spend money and things like that. So confidence that they can actually execute on their to-dos is really important. But I wanted just to touch on this because belief, what we talked about last week, dynamic data completeness, is a very important factor in the action equation. If people don't actually believe in the plan, they're reluctant, frankly, to take action. So today we focused on belief, but all 5 of these ingredients have to be present, or clients will not commit to meaningful new behavior and also experience lasting change. So just to sum up, to take your financial planning business to the highest level, planning software must be complete in its modeling capabilities. If something that clients feel is important is missing, their belief in output will be undermined. And without belief, clients will be reluctant to act.
Book a demo. We'd be happy to show you more of VisionWorks' incredible features.